before. Today, we're just talking about cash and how to have an impact in your local communities and using cash to make that difference. So, Janine mentioned that I used to work for a CDFI, which is a community development financial institution. I'll be honest, before I started working at Self-Help 5+ years ago, I had no idea what a CDFI was. But essentially, what a CDFI is, according to this definition by Opportunity Finance Network, is a CDFI is a private financial institution that's 100% dedicated to delivering responsible, affordable lending to help low income, low wealth, and other disadvantaged people join the economic mainstream. Essentially, CDFIs are your local community banks. These financial institutions that provide these fair financial services, whether it is a checking account or a savings account, and then also those fair loans to support people in their local communities, buy a home or start a business or scale a business, whatever it may be. That's what a CDFI is. Now, granted, I had some of those in my local community. I'm originally from South Carolina. I had no idea that's what they were. We just talked about it as the local community bank. The CDFIs are what I consider one of America's best kept secrets. And I am out here to be a snitch. I am a snitch and I am telling the secret. I want people to know that these institutions are out here doing some really, really good work in order to improve their local communities. So CDFIs often fall into 4 buckets, if you will. You have first a community development bank, and that's essentially a for-profit institution with the same mission that I described before of helping economically distressed neighborhoods and communities and helping them through their lending and their cash investment options. And then you have the community development credit union, and it's similar to a bank. It provides the same services, but the difference is it's a credit union. So it's a nonprofit cooperative that whenever they make a profit, they share it with the members because the members are co-owners of the institution, but they offer the same services as a community development bank. And then you also have a community development loan fund. And these entities, they often provide financing and development services directly to low-income communities. And they usually come in 4 buckets, whether it's a micro enterprise, a small business loan fund, housing, and then a community service organization. These aren't the groups that offer the other type of funds like a savings account or a checking account, but they do offer those lending services. And that's an important piece of the puzzle because many folks, they go directly to a loan fund in order to receive a loan toward whatever needs that they may have. And then finally, the 4th sector of a CDFI are the community development venture capital funds. And these entities, they provide equity and debt with equity features for small and medium-sized businesses. And so, for instance, at Self-Help, in my previous role, we had a venture capital fund that took what we considered to be the riskier loans that really focused on like real estate types of things to like revitalize downtown communities. These entities aren't directly overseen or managed by, let's say, the FDIC, like many of the banks are managed by or overseen by, or the credit unions, they are regulated by the NCUA. These venture funds, they're allowed to take what we consider riskier loans, which is really good for some of the communities that we support. So, although I love talking about CDFIs, I love talking about the work we're doing, to me, it's empty without providing a name and a face to what we're doing. So it's easy for me to talk about self-help and, oh, we've grown from, our first capital being $77 to now having $50 or $5 billion in assets. But really, what does that matter if you don't have a name with a face about the people that you're trying to help? And so here I wanted to put a name and a face to some of the people that we're helping. In particular, I introduced you to Linda Jordan. Linda is from a small town in North Carolina, And she was ready to become a homeowner. I think Linda might have been in her 50s, and she had never purchased a home. She was living in public housing, but she wanted to do more with her life. I think she ended up going to an event that one of the self-help loan officers was attending and speaking at her church, and it was all about lending and how to purchase your first home. And Linda went up to the loan officer and she said, I'm really interested in buying a home, but I really don't think I can. And our loan officer said, okay, wait, we're not saying no just yet. Come into the office, let's talk, let's figure this out, and we'll try and get you to a place where you are eligible to purchase a home. So she worked with our loan officer for months, and eventually she was approved for a home from self-help. And she invited the team into her home after she bought it. I think it was like November. She was like, y'all bring your cameras, bring everything. I want you to see this new home. And so folks went down to see her house and she was so excited. And she said, listen, I have already told my family that Christmas is going to be here this year. I'm going to get me a Christmas tree. I'm going to put it in that corner over there. And we are going to open gifts under that tree in my new house this Christmas. And for me, that's what CDFIs are doing. CDFIs are making a difference. They're building memories. They're helping people build lives so that they can support themselves and they can support their families. And so they can have some really nice Christmases in their own homes with their own trees. And so this is something that, this is just one of the examples of what a CDFI has done and how cash investments with community development financial institutions are making a difference in people's day-to-day lives. The next story I have is from Hope Credit Union, which is another wonderful CDFI. And Hope Credit Union is actually based in Mississippi. But in particular, they worked with Jones Valley Teaching Farm. In this particular group, they operate a 3-acre educational farm in downtown Birmingham, Alabama. And they have gone from just being in Birmingham, Alabama, but to going to have particular teaching farms on the campuses of 6 local Birmingham public schools. So they are really teaching students how to eat healthy, how to grow their food, and how to do not only this for themselves, but also for their families, right? And so it's a ripple effect. Jones Family Teaching Farm, they've been hugely successful in the area. They've been achieving their mission, but they decided they wanted to step up. They wanted to increase their impact. And so what they decided in 2020 was that they wanted to build an 18,000 square foot Center for Food Education right there in Birmingham. And essentially this would have been a $7.5 million loan. Hope Credit Union stepped up because those were the types of people that they wanted to support. Those are the types of communities that they wanted to support. And Hope Credit Union gave them a $7 million loan in order to create this center for that particular community. And so another great thing, this is one particular story. CDFIs across the country are doing this all the time. And it's because of investments, whether that's in the form of a checking or a savings account or a CD, IRA, money market, whatever it may be, those small things, they are able to make impact in local communities like these. I'll also share, when the PPP loans became a thing back in 2020 as a result of COVID, and I'm not sure if everybody's aware of it, so I can just provide some background information on it. But essentially, PPP stands for Paycheck Protection Program. When COVID happened and pretty much the world shut down, a lot of companies may not have been able, and small and large employers may not have been able to pay their employees. And so the federal government stepped in with the Small Business Administration, and they offered to provide these loans that could have been forgiven, essentially, called the PPP loans, in order to help people pay for at least 2 months worth of pay, let employees provide at least 2 months worth of pay for their employees. Now, it was a great idea. The thing is, the plan for the PPP program is that the SBA would send the funds to local financial institutions, and the financial institutions would pass it out. Now, if you had relationships with your bank and you were considered a #1 client, then you were set. However, especially during the first round, when there was a limited amount of money and a lot of people needed help, if you did not have those relationships and you didn't have a private banker on speed dial who knew your name and your company and you contributed a lot of business to them, you may have been overlooked. And that's where CDFIs came in and self-help. When COVID happened, self-help brought all hands on deck across the company. I'd say maybe a half of all employees, we had over 800 plus employees, or half of all employees decided to help with this particular initiative. Everybody picked up the phone. We started calling all kinds of people, our local hairdressers, we called local truck drivers, we called local nonprofits and faith-based institutions to make sure they had what they needed in order to be able to survive and continue to pay their employees and serve the communities that they were in. And that was important. Now, this is only a small snippet of one organization and what they did in order to support communities that may have been left out during these tough times to make sure they received that funding. But there were CDFIs all over the country going out of their way in order to make sure that folks were not left behind. And that's something that we were really proud of. I remember hearing somebody say, how do they word that thing? CDFIs were the economic first responders. They were the ones that were able to really respond to the needs of the communities that were being hit the hardest. So for instance, at self-help, at that point, we had done over $243 million alone in PPP lending. And 62% of all of the dollars that we gave went to nonprofits so that they could continue to address the needs of the communities that they serve, because as you know, those needs didn't stop just because it was COVID. We had over, I think by the time we finished, they had over 2,700 recipients of these individual loans. And one thing that we were super proud of is the median loan amount was only $21,000. That meant that we were intentionally not focusing only on the large institutions, only on the people who may have, or not people, but the employers that may have their private bankers or large amounts. We wanted to make sure that we intentionally focused on the people who weren't as large and who may need smaller loan amounts. They mattered too. 65% of all of our loans went to businesses or organizations that were led by people of color. And we're super proud to say that we were able to maintain over 26,000 jobs because of the work that we did in order to support communities during this time. I will share my story as well. And I'm going to stop sharing for a minute and then I'm going to come back. So as I mentioned before, I'm originally from Columbia, South Carolina. I did not know until recently that my family has been recipients and we have benefited from CDFIs. My father is he's an engineer and he is a contractor, and he has quite a few businesses or properties all over the place. But I had no idea that the bank he often described as the local community bank was a CDFI. I mean, he often, you know how there's a circuit in various communities, word of mouth. And everybody would say, if you need a loan, you need to go to Optus Bank. We didn't know that was a CDFI. We just knew it as a local community institution that can help people that have been traditionally overlooked by mainstream finance. And even now, to this point, my brother is starting to look into some properties in Colombia as well. And my dad's like, hey, you know exactly who you need to call. They aren't going to put you on the runaround. They're not going to make you go above and beyond to show that you are worthy of this particular loan. They'll know that, you know, once you present certain things, that you're eligible and you're able to pay it back. And so I simply say, I am, without even knowing it, I didn't know it, but I am a benefit. I am a recipient of the work that CDFIs have done and the work that CDFIs are continuing to do. And I am truly grateful for it. And that is why I am here to continue to spread the word, spread the gospel, if you will, about what they're doing and how they're affecting people's lives every single day. Because they're not only just helping somebody pay, their mortgage, but essentially you're building generational wealth. And that is what my father has been able to do through his business ventures. And he'll pass it on my brother and I and forward and forward. So yeah, that is my personal story and personal connection to CDFIs. Okay, I'm gonna come back. Give me 1 second. All right, so although I talked about CDFIs a lot, the main reason that we're here is to talk about cash and cash equivalents and why they are super important when developing your impact investing strategy. As I mentioned before, people start directly with what they think is sexy, those stocks, and then maybe bonds, because that's what we hear about. But cash is sometimes the easiest way to get your foot in the door. And so what are cash and cash equivalents? Essentially, they are these low risk, low return instruments. Sometimes it can include your regular checking and saving accounts, CDs, so certificates of deposits. It can be treasury bills, commercial paper, or other money market accounts. And really, why do we need cash? I feel like everybody needs to have what we call that rainy day fund, right? That emergency fund that you can pull from when you need something quickly. And usually, depending on how your life is set up, whether you have one or two incomes in your house, you'll need usually about 3 to 6 months worth of expenses in your cash account. When it comes to cash and cash equivalents, as I mentioned before, people often forget about it, but sometimes cash is really important because banks are lending, especially with impact investing. They decide who they want to lend to, what types of businesses they want to support. And the question becomes, where you place your cash. I often say, where is your cash sleeping? Where does your cash sleep at night? And where your cash is sleeping, is it supporting the communities that you care about? And if that cash is not supporting the communities that you care about, I think it's time for a change. Sometimes a lot of people point out, and there's been a lot of stories in the news in recent years about the fact that a lot of big banks are supporting and funding the fossil fuel industry. Do you want your cash dollars to support that type of work? Your cash will be used for something. It's up to you whether you want it to be used for good or bad. And so that's why it's important to think about where you place your cash in terms of impact, just as much as you think about what stocks and bonds you're purchasing. So cash options, there are on a spectrum. You have, and just by looking at this particular chart here, you have your FDIC, and I'm going to throw in NCUA insured cash that is that you can get with that community development bank or the community development credit unions. Because they are federally insured, they usually have a lower return and very, very low risk. However, as you increase the terms of the cash investment, you can increase the return. As you increase the actual terms, so whether it's 1 year to 5 years, you can increase the return. And depending on what the market is, at any point in time, that will determine how large of a return you can get for your cash investments. But just be mindful, because these cash investments are what we call really liquid, and you can access them at any time, you know, outside of that particular term that it's being used for, you may not get as high of a return as a stock, but that's because of the liquidity, and that's what you're paying for. You need to be able to access these funds when you need them. Some of the products that I mentioned before, if you're looking to invest in your cash: checking accounts, saving accounts, money market accounts, CDs, guarantees, and other fixed income notes. So after everything I've talked about, you are ready to get started, and you're like, okay, let me jump in. This is easy. This is a bank account. There are a few things you still want to think about just to make sure that you are getting what you need out of these particular products. And then also making sure that it's having the impact that you intend for it to have. So for instance, think about your needs and what your time horizons are. There are some people who may need to have something, you know, for that 3 to 6 month period in case they lose their job or something were to happen. And so they might want to keep that within a money market account at a bank. However, you may have some additional money outside of that rainy day fund that you may just want to have and place in a CD that's for a longer term so that you can earn a higher return. It's up to you, but you should be aware of what your needs are and the time horizons as to when you will need to access that money, if at all. Number 2, think about your values. What matters to you, really? Do you care about your local community? Do you care about not supporting fossil fuels? Do you care about supporting minority-owned businesses or women and children or poverty, whatever it may be? Think about what your passions are, and then tailor your cash investment based off of that about what you want to achieve. Set a goal and pick a place to start. You can have $1,000 in cash, and you can say, hey, my time horizon, know what the amount is, know what your particular time horizon is, and where you want to place this money. That is how you develop your strategy. And then do your research. And I have a few websites that I can provide as resources for you. But start with the organization's website. See what they're doing. Ask them. I have no problem calling somebody and saying, hey, can you tell me more about how these funds are being used? Who are you helping? And if they are, ask them, you know, to tell a story. Many people may. I think you are entitled to ask these questions as you develop your own strategy. So, how do you pick a financial institution? Try the triple bottom line approach. You know, does it deliver benefit to the communities and your planet while also offering you a competitive return? Making sure it's grounded in communities. Does it understand information about the key people that they are serving in those particular communities? Are their products designed really to meet the needs of the customers and safeguard the environment? You can ask all of these questions. I mean, and we can send out this PowerPoint to Janine if it'll be helpful to your audience. Try to make sure you are doing no harm. And you can ask these questions as well. Is the lending practice of that particular financial institution, are they committed to regeneration, not extraction? Look for yourself. Ask them, are their employees being paid a living wage? What steps are they taking in order to get to that level if they aren't? And then if you really want information on a specific bank in particular, check out Bank on Good. They provide independent reviews about various institutions that can be beneficial to you and help guide your research. And if, in particular, if you're looking to support a CDFI or community loan fund, so those institutions that are directly in these communities, OFN, Opportunity Finance Network, which is like the trade association of all of the CDFIs, they have an incredible CDFI locator on their website, and you're able to type in your state or your zip code, and you can say exactly what communities you want to support. And if you're looking for a bank or a credit union or a loan fund or whatever it may be, and you can sort it and filter it that way, and it can take you exactly to what you're looking for. You can check and see if it's been certified by the Department of Treasury. Ask the CDFI if they have an ARIS rating. There are many entities out here that are holding CDFIs, they're holding us accountable, and ARIS is one of them, so ask them about that. And then you, as I said before, you can always go to their website to see what they're talking about and how they communicate their impact, if at all. So I am going to stop sharing right now.